Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, and we're the pod.
Well, it's another week of the Bad Batch After Show here on Star Wars Escape Pod, and we've got special guest Darian with us again. It's just myself, no Blake this week, and nobody else. We're going to be diving into episode 9 of the Bad Batch season 3, as well as 7 main changes made to Star Wars special editions that came out in the 90s, and of course some of these changes also re-released over the years, so we're going to be diving into that too. So even if you're not into the Bad Batch or whatever, keep listening. We'll hit some subjects you might like. We're also going to be talking briefly about the Acolyte trailer, some of the backlash there with the teaser having hit YouTube, and some other small Star Wars headlines, so stay tuned for that. Let's dive into this week's episode of The Bad Batch, The Harbinger, episode 9. Let's do it.
Another happy landing.
All right, welcome back, Darian.
Hello, my friends.
Hello.
Good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming back on. It was it's a quiet week this week. I nearly delayed it if it were not for you wanted to pop on this week. So here we are, and another Bad Batch episode has hit Disney Plus. This one was a big one, so it's almost too bad that so many people were busy. But we saw the return of a pretty major character in the show, which I'm sure you and I both have a lot to say about. And this one's called The Harbinger. It's directed by Stuart Lee and written by Jennifer Corbett. This episode premiered on Disney Plus March 27th, 2024. And what I'll do here is I'll just read the summary real quick, so that anyone who hasn't seen the episode, who doesn't really care if it's spoiled or not, can follow along and get into this conversation. And we'll dive right in. So this is episode 9 of season 3, which is the final season. While waiting on Pabu, the Batch encounters Fennec Shan's contact, Asajj Ventress, who informs them that the M count signifies a person's innate connection to the Force. Omega has Ventress test her using the Jedi ways, but once they've discovered Ventress's identity, the Batch's distrust of her is fanned to hostility. Convinced that Ventress is sincere, Omega continues the tests under her, but during their final trial at sea, they inadvertently summon and are attacked by a sea monster. Ventress rescues Omega and pacifies the creature, thereby gaining ground with the rest of the Bad Batch. Before leaving, Ventress claims that Omega's M count is low, but after indirectly admitting to the adult clones that she was lying, she warns them that they will not be safe on Pabu while the Empire keeps hunting Omega. So that's the summary there. And what kind of initial thoughts do you have on this episode?
This is probably the. Did you read Flowers for Algernon when you were in high school?
No, I didn't.
So this episode really made me think of that story. The premises was it was a mentally disabled guy in the 70s that was working at a bakery. He was basically the janitor. And they came up with this medical procedure that could make him a literal genius. So he goes from saying a paragraph of stuff to express this very simple idea to he tells you a story with 3 words. And it's something I've always kept because I like writing. And this episode, I feel like not much happened, but it expressed an unbelievable amount about several of the characters and where the rest of the season's going. So that's why I really wanted to talk about this episode.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great thing to bring up for sure. Why don't we start with that actually? Because I think the majority of what I have to say about it has to do with Ventress and stuff. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with that?
Okay, so the main thing is this is the first time we've seen Pabu in like a murky, dark, like normally it's very happy, vibrant, warm colors. When we enter this episode, it's overcast, everything's washed out, there's no real greens, everything's crushed right down. And throughout the episode, you get this fog rolling in and out, which shows that bad times are about to happen for Pabu, right? So like right out the go, the establishing shot, that's what you see. The next one of Ventress creeps into the cave, and everything's all in these shadows, and the dog's barking and everything, and she walks out of the light into this unknown. As the episode goes on, she warns them, "You're not as safe as you think you are here." So this, I wouldn't say it beat us over the head because most of these warnings were pretty subtle, but I think Pablo's about to burn.
Right. Yeah, it's got a certain look, like a bit of a overcast, darker tone to Pabu, compared to when we first was introduced to this place in season 2, which was quite the paradise, quite the tropical getaway place, an island in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but water, and seems like kind of a safe place to be. And now it's not looking so great anymore. I mean, now it's looking like maybe they can't stay there anymore. Maybe they're more in danger than I think they initially thought, for sure.
Exactly. Star Wars is really great about using everything as metaphors. And can I go into a spoiler for the episode for later?
There we go.
So when the Ventress tries to commune with nature, and I feel like it was a moment of her accidentally expressing her dark side out. She's got those green glowing manta ray eel things, or manta rays, going around her boat. She accidentally summons the giant kaiju monster, right? Mm-hmm. I thought that was a great example of their actions accidentally bringing doom to the island, because this place has been nothing but like happy fishing village up to this point, and right next to Pabu is this threat that could wipe them all out easily.
Right. I think it's kind of funny that this is now I don't know how many episodes now that they've had some super dangerous large creature in a row, but somebody said this, I think it was Kirk, he was talking about it last week. He said like there's been a lot of consistent sort of monster style episodes lately, and this one was just kind of another one to follow in those footsteps. And I don't really know what to think about that, only because it's probably been, at this point, I'm sure it's like the #1 Star Wars show with the most kind of like monster scare-ish kind of theme episodes, which I don't really know if this one was quite to the same degree that others have featured monsters. But, I mean, for those who are into really large creatures, I guess like that was a plus. But it almost didn't surprise me that when he popped out of the water, it's like, okay, yeah. It was like the 4th one in a row that we've seen like some big alien creature, pose a threat in the plot line. So that was a bit repetitive for me, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's certainly not a safe place to be anymore. Yeah.
Well, the Bad Batch has been doing this, specifically the kaijus. It's always done it, but it's been ramping it up as the show goes on. It's been more and more consistent. Mm-hmm. So I like it and I hate it, because now it's become the trope of the show, but they've been also using it to either nod to other films and kind of tell you what's going on in an underhanded way, but also Star Wars really does need more creatures, and they've been really doing a good job of that for the most part. Like in this episode, we saw 4 different types of fish, a couple of little like running around bipedal vegetarian things, the kaiju. I think there was a bird in there. So I think that they're trying to seed the world more so that when they go to other things, they don't have to be like, hey, here's this thing that has always been here that we've never shown before. Mm-hmm. So Ventress is one of my favorite characters. Like pretty much the only person in Star Wars I prefer is Asajj Ventress, because even Dave Filoni said his potential was the greatest Force user we've ever seen. He just didn't have the training, really, is what his problem was.
Yeah.
Someone's calling here. But so when Ventress comes back this time, she wasn't using her black market saber that she was using in the previous series, like the end of Clone Wars and whatnot. She had that straight saber with all the perforated metal on it. Because Maul at the end of season 7, he uses that. So she had a curved saber this episode, I noticed. But it's not her curved saber from Clone Wars because it's got some like metal filigree in the back of the handle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
I thought that was interesting.
A little backstory for anyone who just hasn't been fully brushed up on Clone Wars is this character has originally died in the Clone Wars continuity. This is canon material. It's quite old now, the book. I would say maybe something close to 9-8 years, something like that, maybe a little less. But Dark Disciple, written by Christy Golden, adapted 8 Clone Wars episodes that was never produced because Disney had canceled the Clone Wars when they first bought Lucasfilm. And there was a Clone Wars extension sort of in a last ditch effort to get all the stories out there as best as possible, at least all the ones that they had scripts for that were reproducible in some manner. Because the whole show was originally written to be 8 seasons, and I forget who it was. One of the writers has came out initially and said all 8 seasons were written, and I think it was Pablo Hidalgo who said that they still look at all those stories as canon and as having had happened, even with internal story development, that is. But some of those stories were adapted and released as material that people can consume. So 4 episodes were released 4 episodes were released in a comic book form under the Dark Horse label, and it was called Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. And those 4 episodes take place between season 5 and season 7, which what is now season 7 would have been season 8 for a finale. The Siege of Mandalore, which brought Darth Maul back into the picture after being captured by Palpatine. There's a bit of a missing link there to when he gets captured by Palpatine on Mandalore the first time he tries to take the planet, and then when he shows up again and he's got the planet back. And a lot of people are like, what the heck is going on? It's because that those episodes aren't watchable, they're only readable. So unfortunately, this is sort of what happened. And when they came back to do season 8, they actually just took those last couple episodes and then shifted them back into a makeshift season 7 and sort of made that happen. And then we lost a whole bunch of story material that would have happened between season 6 and season 8, essentially. But 4 episodes were saved with a comic book, Son of Dathomir. There was another 4 episodes which were released as actually 8 episodes. 4 of them, which was the original Bad Batch arc from the Clone Wars, which that ended up getting completed in the existing season 7. So that technically doesn't count now. There was 4 other story reels, which are like proxy animation episodes released online on StarWars.com, and now they're very hard to find. If you own the Blu-ray for season 6, you can watch them. They don't exist on YouTube anymore, at least the last time I looked. They were on StarWars.com for a while as well, but those have since been taken down. It was the Crystal Crisis on Utapau arc, which featured Obi-Wan and Anakin going to Utapau to look for this big, huge crystal, it's one of the Kyber crystals for the Death Star. And it was supposed to be a plotline that introduced the idea that the Death Star is already being created, at this point in the Clone War. And they got wind of, this very suspicious transaction happening on Utapau, which turned out to be the crystal. So that was a really cool arc. And then 8 episodes were adapted into a novel called Dark Disciple. And these 8 episodes featured Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress. And they have got to be probably some of the most exciting, riveting episodes, in my opinion, of the entire show. And unfortunately, you can't watch them. They're all included in this novel, which is released under Del Rey. It's an adult Star Wars novel, not one of the junior ones. It's an adult novel. And they're easily some of the best episodes ever made. And they were written by Katie Lucas, George Lucas's daughter. And the original ending to Asajj Ventress was in that book, and it would have been in that story or in that show, however you want to look at it. But for many years now, I think a lot of us have kind of been familiar with the canonicity that Ventress met her demise in Dark Disciple by sacrificing herself for Quinlan Vos, which is at this point now sort of become the love of her life and her redeemer, because as we know, she kind of grew up as a villain throughout the Clone Wars and antagonized in many ways, and then her character has shifted a lot, going from a Sith apprentice, or going from a Jedi initially to a Sith apprentice, to a night sister, to losing everything there again, and then going into bounty hunting, and then meeting Quinlan Vos, and then kind of getting redeemed in a way, and finding love there, and that sort of pointing that character in a whole new direction for herself, and then giving her life for that character. And the only two people to have known that where she's buried is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Quinlan Vos, which bury her on Dathomir in the waters of life. And some magical stuff happens, which sort of they look at it as taking her body home, but she is long gone. She is dead. So now she's back. Now she's back in this show. It was actually Dave Filoni who made the decision to bring this character back, and I just have a lot of questions as to why. Dark Disciple is one of my favorite Star Wars books ever made as well. So have you read Dark Disciple, Darren?
I started it and I have not had a chance to finish it. Like I'm at the point where Ventress is Quinlan's doing his workouts that Ventress has made him do, and she's like leaning on him as he's trying to do these handstands and like screwing with him a bit. So they've just joined up.
Right. So it's pretty early then. Pretty early in the book. Yeah,
it's been good. I have so much going on that trying to sit down and actually read has not been something I've been able to do. Well, I hate Star Wars constantly bringing people back. She's at least somebody worth bringing back. And like they even joked about it towards the end of the episode when she says, "I've got a few more lives left." It's kind of like the cat that just has 9 lives, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's the way that she kind of exits this episode. And my whole complaint is like they enter this episode with pretty much no reason to how she's resurrected, and then she leaves with more questions than answers, right? And StarWars.com and StarWars.com and their social media pages have been pretty outspoken with saying like we will find a way to like explain these stories down the road with future shows or whatever, however they do it. So like there's a lot of speculation to what they could do there, but I think to me, I don't know about you, Darian, but like to me, whenever a character has such a good death and is just like respected by so many people, for quite some time, and then they bring that character back just like out of the blue, with no real build up, it just to me just feels a little cheap. And I don't know, is that the feeling that, I don't know if anyone's read the book like I have, like all those years ago, that's the feeling at least that you might share. To anyone who hasn't read the book, like maybe it's a different feeling, and to anyone who didn't even know the book existed and didn't know that Clone Wars carried on in the literature side of Star Wars, then maybe there's no feelings at all. Maybe it's just sort of like, oh, finally they're bringing her back into the story. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on bringing back characters and resurrecting characters out of left field?
I really wish they'd stop doing it in general. Ventress is the one character that I wanted to see more of. So I'm a little biased towards it. Like I'm more willing to forgive it. And also, I mean, I remember a time where I was pissed off the first time they brought her back, because in the terrible Samurai Jack Clone Wars, she dies in there, and then like at a brutal death at the hands of Anakin Skywalker. So when she comes back in the Clone Wars proper and is able to take on Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it's just like, well, okay, hold on. She couldn't take on just Anakin before, and now she's taking on both of them and kicking their ass. I was a little upset by that when it was new.
Yeah, that's fair. I remember that too. I remember watching that theatrical release and thinking like, oh man, like that's like, I didn't know that the show was going to follow that theatrical release, and then I thought like, oh man, like not only is that a bit of a disservice to the character initially, but and I grew to love the character and love the changes, but at the same time, like it was a bit of a like, oh wait, like that's not it, and wow, this character's already quite powerful and all that stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and they definitely like right away in the Clone Wars let Ventress earn her place. Like she was a character I was very indifferent in the Samurai Jack thing to her, because they didn't make a character for her. And then when they brought her back in Clone Wars proper, it was like, why didn't you just come up with a new character? Like, why do we have to bring back somebody that you actually killed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think,
I mean, she's
by the time that you're finished reading that book, I would hope, I'd like to follow up with you and just, I'd hope to get your opinion on just how you're feeling with that ending, and where they're bringing her in, on the next chapter kind of thing of Star Wars stories. But we've got a new guest joining us now as well, actually. So let's hit the blast doors here. Hello. This is it Pax?
Yeah, Pax Longevity.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
Do you hear me?
I can. Yes.
We can.
Okay, right on. Yeah, I was trying to get my mic working here, but it's not working properly.
No
Well,
problem.
thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining
Yeah,
us.
no problem.
You're coming through loud and clear, so all seems well over here on this end. But well,
right on.
first timer on the Star Wars Escape Pod. So, but yeah, Pags, we're already kind of midway through chatting about the latest episode of the Bad Batch, and what are your initial thoughts of this week's episode with Ventress coming back, having been resurrected, all that stuff? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I want to see more of Asajj Ventress. I hear there's going to be more of her in the future here. Like, I'm hearing that we're going to get some maybe live action Asajj Ventress, and we need some more to tie that in.
I am absolutely on the same page with you.
You guys are hoping
Yeah, are we going to see Asajj Ventress?
Yeah, are you guys hoping for stories that bridge the gap between Dark Disciple and the Bad Batch then?
Bad Batch, well, and Ahsoka.
Right. So you
hope that'll bring us into the future.
That's an interesting.
I've been saying
idea.
for years, why do we? I've been saying for years, why do we keep getting Tatooine when there's a planet full of hot goth chicks?
I
think we can visit anywhere we like.
I guess season 2 is going to bring us there, Darian. You'll get your dream come true in season 2. I guess that's where season 1 left off, right? Like they're parking their big Star Destroyer on Dathomir.
Yes,
that's what I'm hoping, right?
Yes, and you have Asajj Ventress as another Night Sister.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I think now that the Empire is over, that she's more interested in serving Dathomir.
What did you guys think when they brought Palpatine back in episode 9?
What did I think?
You're talking about
initially, I didn't understand it. Yeah. But I'm glad that they're trying to build on that story to make some sense of it, and I like any attempts at doing that because it really offended a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Do you because I still struggle a lot with that story, and I feel like it's always in a way diminished the conclusion in Return of the Jedi, you know, when that final sacrifice is made and the balance is restored, and then, you know, within 30 years, like, everything is messed up again and needs to be rebalanced with like a second chosen one, if you will. I've always felt very almost like a little, I guess, ill-hearted, I guess, towards that narrative, and go ahead, Darian.
So if you want to get into the post-quills, I'm going to need a lot more time than we have tonight to express my feelings on that.
Right. So I guess
I love what Daisy Ridley did with what she was given.
Right.
But I kind of felt like, they changed directions so much. And to give you the perfect example, Daisy Ridley was on a TV show and she was billed as the character Rey Kenobi. So, they screwed up and admitted that she was Kenobi's daughter during the first movie, and then backpedaled it so that they could shoehorn in the Emperor later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's I think just in general bringing back characters. I mean, we've seen this a few times. We've seen it with now Palpatine, Boba Fett, Darth Maul, and now Ventress. And I think in the Clone Wars they did of course bring back Echo, which is within the story he was used as a cybernetic experiment by the Techno Union, and then therefore that's why he's one of the Bad Batch characters. For those who hadn't seen Clone Wars. Darth Maul's another one. So Darth Maul was a big one. When George Lucas said to Dave Filoni when they were doing Clone Wars, we're going to bring back Darth Maul. Dave was the guy who was like, what the heck? Like, why are we doing this? Like, it was such a good death scene, you know, like everything else. Like, how is this possible? Is it going to work? Are people going to accept this? And, I feel like in general, a lot of people have, and I've never felt
absolutely
ill will towards the return of Darth Maul, only because that character had like 3 lines in the movie and he was so sick, and I feel like his character's only gotten better as we've seen him now through Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. Would you guys agree? Like seeing that character back, that was a plus.
Oh yeah, and seeing him in the Clone Wars, that has some of the best Darth Maul moments ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Sam Witwer brings a lot of life to him,
particularly the hallway scene.
Totally.
I love
Yeah.
the hallway scene much, where it's like, I don't even need a lightsaber. I'm going to wipe out a battalion of clones by myself with doors.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
so good.
some of the best and Darth Maul coming back to Rebels. I also enjoyed him in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know. He made that show. Like, before that, it
Right.
felt like there wasn't really a direction for the Rebels crew.
Oh yeah, season 1, season 2, but then when Darth Maul came in, changed everything.
Yeah, so there's definitely been some beneficial, examples to bringing characters back, and I think, at least in my opinion, like it is yet to be seen as to whether or not bringing Ventress back is a bonus for the fandom and for the stories and going forward, and because I mean she is such a beloved character, and I love Ventress's character so much, which is why it sort of pains me to have appreciated just the way that they exited that character initially, and now that's being almost even though they're acknowledging that it happened, and like that they've said it multiple times now at this point, but they're acknowledging it happened, but they're not kind of sticking to it. They're changing the narrative, and anyone who is a huge fan of Return of the Jedi, it's very similar feeling, with how Palpatine was originally exited out and then all of a sudden brought back. Even
within the book, I've been told that at the end of the book they put her in the Iker on Dathomir, which is known for being able to resurrect people and whatnot. She was in stasis from the Force lightning between when Dooku drops her and when she gets back to Dathomir. So I've kind of taken that as she was mostly dead, to quote Princess Bride, because I'm that age.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna be weird to, like, I guess, go forward and hear whatever they come up with. I hope it's a good reason, because when the Night Sister resurrection stuff happens, like, it's not really quite the same as I guess real life, like, the characters that they bring back with the Night Sister magic, they're all like zombified and everything like that. They're not quite how they used to be.
I did find it interesting. They could talk on mics and stuff too. They are coherent.
The zombie, the Night Sister.
Yeah,
zombies?
the Night Troopers. Oh. Yeah, the Night Troopers. They could all talk on mics. Yeah.
Well, not all of the Night Troopers were zombies. Only so in Ahsoka, the Death Troopers were zombies, but most of the Stormtroopers that were wearing the armor that had been pieced back together with that Japanese filling with gold art, those were still mostly alive.
Yeah, those are all like alive people still. Yeah. But that's kind of my main concern, right? Like that.
Sorry, I want to go on a rant a little bit about this in Ahsoka, because I've seen so many fans don't get this.
Go for it.
Ezra didn't have a lightsaber, so how was he defending himself? He was crushing the Stormtroopers with rocks.
Oh yeah, that seems likely. Like, why not? Yeah, he was trained by Kanan. He was trained by Kanan and Ahsoka to just not use his lightsaber. So I don't see him have to depend on it at all.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
exactly. And I see so many people bump up against this specific thing with Ahsoka, and it's like, he kind of showed us that already, though, in the episodes. Like, it's just, he used what he has available to him. He's kind of a pacifist. So why would
I find people get upset that he went and made a lightsaber right after that. But I mean, there's a difference between needs and wants. He didn't need it, but now he wants one.
Yep.
And now he's got the tools to build one too.
Right?
Yeah.
I need to build an awesome one.
Right. So I have the last page of Dark Disciple here. If you want me to just go through it real quick, so that we can kind of break down just sort of the narrative originally with this character, so that we can kind of get an idea. I'm skipping over a lot of like the love stuff, which makes this moment even more emotionally impactful. But basically, if you've ever for anyone listening, ever really connected with the Luke and Vader goodbye moment, where he says, like, "You were right, Luke, you tell your sister you were right," and then he kind of dies. There's not a lot of tears there, but between the Quinlan Vos and Ventress death scene, there's definitely tears there. So like it's a little more sort of, it's not quite the father-son that never knew each other relationship. These are two people that have worked together under a secret Black Ops mission for the last couple weeks or months or whatever. and gotten to know each other really well, and one of them having gone into the darkness and the other brought them back, and vice versa kind of thing. These people have like fallen in love with each other, and one of them has now given their life for that other person. So that's the context of this final moment. It says here, he took a shaky breath. He had thought he would dread this moment, but he was surprised to feel more a sense of quiet peace than pain. This was the right thing to do, and he knew it bone deep. Slowly, reverently, he lifted his arms as if he were holding Ventress in them. Her body rose into the air in response. Vos bore her in the force to the still, dark pool and gently lowered her. Slowly, the black water closed over her, accepting her into its embrace. Her face was the last of her to disappear, pale and bearing an expression of serenity that she had never known in her life. He blinked. Was the water changing color? Tendrils of mist began to rise, green and glowing. Green like the Dathomiri magics Ventress had spoken of. Green like the water of life. Vos caught his breath. Soft susurrations reached his ears, sounding almost like Kenobi was beside him immediately, his lightsaber unlit but in his hand. Vos, what's happening? Slowly, incredulously, Vos understood. His heart ached with the bittersweet joy. Listen, was all he said. Kenobi's eyes widened. He heard it too now. The whispers of women's voices. The Force had reclaimed Dathomir's wayward child, and as Vos reached out into it to send the woman he loved a final farewell, he thought he could make out a single word: sister. Asajj Ventress, at last, had come home. That's the end of the novel. So, like,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I've spent years just loving that exit, for the character. And she just shows up in the animated series now going like, hey, what's up? I'm back. And I don't know. To me, I just didn't really enjoy it. Like, I got to be honest. Like, it was so cool to see the character back again in animated form. But
What time frame was that passage?
This is before the end of the Clone Wars ends. So this novel is eight Clone Wars episodes that were adapted into a novel after Disney canned the show for a while. And then when they brought the show back, they never fully finished the show because it was originally supposed to be 8 seasons, right? So there was a whole bunch of episodes that got adapted into other material. There were 8 episodes that were released as proxy animation. There were 4 that were adapted into a comic book for Darth Maul. And then there was the 8 episodes that were adapted into this Dark Disciple novel. So quite a lot of adaptive, trying to get those stories out. And I've always just really, really loved that book. It's up there on my #1 list, right next to Darth Plagueis. And it's a canon novel. And StarWars.com and everyone who's been behind the Bad Batch show has been very adamant that they will connect that story to the Bad Batch because they know that fans of the Clone Wars have all, embraced this moment for the character as her goodbye, right? And I think it's just maybe I feel strongly about it than other people, for having read this book a long time ago. And it's just always kind of lived in my head as like a, free rent kind of like story that's just so awesome. And now it's like forever changed. So maybe that's why I'm just not super on board with like this character coming back. But for me, it was a little.
I haven't noticed. I haven't noticed that Asajj Ventress has appealed to a lot of people. And she has only had a very little screen time, only in Clone Wars, and she really reaches and touches a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are very interested in what is going to happen with her.
Yeah.
Well, her story in general is like, I know so many punk girls that have a very similar story. Like if you take the mysticism and like the Force and stuff out of it, she was raised as like kind of a daddy's girl to a stepfather idea, and then that person was taken out of their life and she rebelled and used her sexuality. When people saw her as a sexual thing, she used it against them, right? Because like when people hit on her and stuff, she leans into it and then kills them. And I've seen, not that the punk girls are going around killing people, but they sucker people in that are not respecting them as a person. So I see a lot of ladies respond to that as well. But she's also one of the few female archetypes in Star Wars that is their own person, that apologizes for nothing and is somebody to be reckoned with that people disrespect. Because like the lady with tattoo across her face, the Jedi, she constantly talks down about Ventress in that first episode that she's in, and then gets her ass absolutely handed to her in the first time they go duel.
Yeah.
Asajj felt really strong in the latest episode of Bad Batch, though. She handled all 3 of them, no problem.
She did, yeah. I think like as far as positive things that I have to say about this, like it was really cool to see like martial arts brought into Star Wars again.
The fighting scene was great.
She did it mostly without the Force. Like the only person she actually used the Force on in both of those sequences was Wrecker.
Yeah.
I was kind of rooting for Wrecker even before it started.
Well, like no, because when she hits him first in the eye, and then she goes for the back of his knees when he's distracted, right? That's very judo of like, well, not the eye part, but using the weakness of your distracted opponent against them. And then when she uses the force to push him back, he's ready for her at that moment. So she just is like, well, I can't physically deal with him this way because it's on his terms. So that's when she uses the force, and then she chokes him later, right? Other than that whole fight, she only takes away their weapons, and then the rest is purely her martial arts skill.
Yeah.
Will Omega become Ventress's apprentice?
I'll take a swing at a guess. I'm gonna say no, just only because like I think maybe they might be going a different route with Ventress's character. But it would be interesting to see if like I quite enjoy the Omega's character. Like she used to be somewhat annoying, but I feel like it's like one of those characters that could definitely, age well, I guess, like in Star Wars stories, similar to Ezra Bridger, like when that show first came out, I just couldn't stand Ezra. And then, by the end of it and more so now with Ahsoka out, they've definitely done good on that character a lot. Right. And I think Ahsoka is definitely the pinnacle for, characters that were once hated by pretty much all Star Wars fans and then went to being like a fan favorite. So, I think like I have high hopes for Omega's character, and if it's Dave Filoni bringing back Ventress, obviously I've got some sting there, but at the same time, I'm sure he's got big plans for the character, and I look forward to seeing what he does now that she is back. Right now that they've put so much work into trying to bring this character back, it's got to be for good reason. So for that, I hold out hope at the very least. Good. That's a good question. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen to her?
To Omega?
Yeah, Omega and the apprenticeship under Ventress, the tutelage under Ventress. Like, what are your thoughts there with that?
I think there's a lot of potential there, but I'm not sure. At this point, I'm kind of not even sure.
Right.
I think by the end of all this, there's going to be no more Bad Batch members. I have a feeling they're all done for, and Asajj is probably going to end up with Omega.
Yeah, interesting.
I know it's dark, but there's only like 7 episodes left, and I'm thinking that might be around the end of it.
Yeah. I mean, that would be nice.
They can kill them all off.
I would like to see some more sacrifices being made. I mean, I think that's what keeps these shows and these stories real and relatable. Like these are. I think Crosshair is one of the more brilliant characters of the group, in terms of how they've developed that character and his story. And I think like
I figure he might survive too.
There's a great redemption arc for that character, right? And like when it comes to what they could do with him in terms of his fate, I think he's going to be the one that's going to be biting the dust in terms of saving Omega or whatever, right? Like I think I could totally see that happening.
Oh, right.
And I'd be a big fan of that. I'd be a big fan of exiting that character in the service. But that's the whole thing. That's why I absolutely love the original death for Ventress, because she was doing it, out of an act of love, right? And I think that's definitely one of the more powerful things in Star Wars storytelling is whenever a character is redeemed, it's usually because of that. And that's a parallel that runs between all the stories. It's the same with Kanan as well. Anyone who really connects with the
a little bit of tragedy is needed here.
Totally. Yeah.
I would love his redemption arc could definitely close out with him sacrificing himself for Omega. But I would love just once in Star Wars for them to lead us to that, and then him go, nope. No, I'm not going to do it. And then run away and do his own thing. Just once, because he's the character that is so used to being alone and made peace with that in a weird way, even though he was bitter towards the Bad Batch, that he could actually go that route, that everybody doesn't get the reaction of.
Right. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and bring up something that Ventress said in the episode. She said in reference to the M count, the midichlorians, she said, "Your blood doesn't make you a Jedi. You have to be trained for that." And I thought this was another nice kind of little nod of the head to, anyone who's looked down on the midichlorian lore in Star Wars. I've always never minded it. I've always quite enjoyed it, to be honest, because it adds a little bit of I don't know, just some biological sort of reasoning for how some people are just more gifted than others, right? And it's like those weird, crazy circumstances where someone in the real world, if they're an insanely good painter or whatever, and they have a kid, there's a good likelihood that their kid is also going to be very talented in that trait, right? And it's sort of it's one of those weird kind of things. It's like we all got our gifts, right? I mean, it's like I'm so terrible with my hands. Like I would not be able to do like metalworking, woodworking, anything. And yet Darian's a talented guy for that kind of thing, right? So it's like we all got our strengths and weaknesses. And I think midichlorians have always been sort of a great way to describe, okay, there's this greater power that people can connect to. Life would not exist without midichlorians, which means everyone has them. But, it's those that have a higher count, which are able to, just more accessibly, get to that level of discipline in order to tap into the force, right? And tap into that power. So I like that Ventress just had another way of saying that and explaining that, among other Star Wars
I like
stories,
how she clarified it.
dived into that as well. But clarify. Yeah, clarification for sure.
How old were you when Phantom Menace came out, Josh?
I was 4.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Okay, so I grew up for the first 15 years of my life where the Force was purely a mystical religious thing. You grew up where they tried to hard science the Force. Now, the Bad Batch and Ahsoka and all those have tried to bridge the gap of those two, and I love that they're doing that because it's like, hey, it can be science and it can be mystical. It is both. In the Phantom Menace, they just tried to hard sciences, and that's what people bucked against.
Yeah, I think that's a big misinterpretation though, because like those stories are all from George Lucas, and like all of this lore is inside of his head. I think like it's never gone away from the mystical side. It's only just sort of expanded that outlook on how the Force is, right? But I think like the way that it has been described in more recent Star Wars stories, like has been a very beneficial thing for any like any discrepancy with how like the Force is, because like even from a young age, like seeing those original Star Wars films, like, and then the prequels as well, it was never at least how I looked at it, it was never a superpower, right? Like whereas like I think anyone who's just seen the Phantom Menace might think, okay, it's like a superpower, right? But any other Star Wars movie will expand that view and go like, oh no, it's this greater thing, but it's like gifted people can be easier accessible to it, but with enough training and discipline, like anyone can be a Jedi, or anyone could be a Force wielder, if you will, but the gate is only open so far for just anyone. It's open a bit wider for those that have a natural born gift to it. And I think that's definitely like a really nice way to describe it. But I think like I can totally see that like the reason, like a good reason for having a lot of these bridgings of the different perspectives out there, because it is such a crazy like mythological thing that almost no one even in Star Wars fully understands. There's things about the Force that they haven't explained. Like George Lucas never got around to telling his stories as to how the wills work, but I mean that would have been truly fascinating to find out, and something that he would have based his sequel movies on. But I mean, yeah, it's cool to see these things, right? Like, so like Darian, because you grew up in a different time, different era, like do you look fondly on things like this, things trying to bridge the gap here, or do you still did you have like a negative outlook on midichlorians when they were first a thing?
I kind of had a mixed thing, because I believe in science, and with the things I've done in my life, like I do a lot of psychology and counseling and stuff like that. I help people, and while I'm this blacksmith, jeweler, leatherworker, all that stuff, I'm also very into, we can figure out everything if we put enough time and effort and money into it. So I like the midichlorians, but I think how they were introduced was such a shock to people that, and let's face it, George Lucas's strength is not in the spoken word.
Right.
The way he writes lines for actors is not his strength at all. But Pax, how old are you?
I'm 46.
Oh, so what was
so you're older than me. So.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on this, Pax?
Yeah, I like the fact that they're bridging this gap. It totally makes sense that they try to scientifically explain this mystical force that's happening, right? And even Asajj Ventress, she mentions that everything has a certain limit or a certain amount of midichlorians, and they say, and I like how she says that they say that the more midichlorians you have, the more force sensitive you have. Almost like everything's a rumor, nobody knows facts, and this is just people's basic understanding at that time. Even like Qui-Gon Jinn, that was his understanding at that time.
But the way they came off with it in The Phantom Menace was like, oh, he's got more midichlorians than Yoda. He's going to be a greater Jedi. And I think that was what people railed against, was they just tried to science it. Whereas now it's, hey, just because you've got a lot of midichlorians doesn't mean you are going to be the greatest. Just because you got very few doesn't mean you can't be a Jedi. And I think they went a little too far on that side, but not so much that I'm going to be upset about it.
Right.
Well, and Asajj, she clears it up. To be a Jedi requires training.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm just saying with Sabine, I think that was a little too much. Like, anybody can be a Jedi if they just try hard enough.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, I've always thought that all of a sudden, oh, I get it, and it just kind of works for her all of a sudden. Like, was a little extreme.
Well, it is coming along slowly, but I do feel it was unnecessary as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are starting to earn it. I'm happy overall with what they're doing. I just wish they would draw out the approach a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe if Sabine couldn't block some shots, I don't know. But she seemed a little bit over the top. But yeah, I could let some things go,
Exactly. That's not what I'm gonna impale myself on to die for Star Wars.
Yeah.
But we barely discussed this episode of Bad Batch. My ADD is just
No, this is it's all relevant stuff though. It's all deeper discussion among topics that this episode is kind of given us subjects to talk about in the first place. So it's good stuff. But here's some trivia for you guys, because this is some interesting little just fun facts, I guess. So Ventress still wears her bounty hunter pauldron from her Clone Wars uniform that we last saw her in. It's like a blue pauldron on the one left, I think it's her left shoulder. So that was kind of neat to see that she's maintained a little bit of the same look. Also probably symbolizes the fact that she is in fact still doing her bounty hunting job. Or maybe dabbling in it again. Her new lightsaber. This is her fourth lightsaber, believe it or not. She had in the flashback in the Clone Wars, she had a green lightsaber when she was under the tutelage of Kai Narek, which was her Jedi Master, and that was her first. Then she was given her, at least to those who still sort of mentally accept the in-between, not confirmed canon parts of the micro series, the lightsabers given to her from Dooku, which are the curved red-hilted lightsabers, or the red-bladed curved hilt lightsabers that she dual wields through most of the Clone Wars, until the point that she's no longer a Sith apprentice anymore, and she carries on without those at one point in the show. And in the Dark Disciple novel, she has her own unique yellow lightsaber, which is a straight hilt. The shaft towards the top has this kind of textured hold look. In fact, actually, most recently at Disney parks, they began selling the Dark Disciple Ventress lightsaber as a replica that you can buy at Disney parks. And there's a few floating around out there. So that was her third saber. And now her fourth lightsaber is the same yellow blade from Dark Disciple, but now in a curved hilt fashion, which looks like it's a mix between her Clone Wars curved hilt and her Dark Disciple straight kind of sort of half Jedi look hilt. So
I'd argue it's her fifth.
Is there a fifth?
So she took her Jedi Master's lightsaber and wielded that for years, and that is canon. It's both in the Samurai Jack one, and they nod to it a few times throughout Clone Wars. She had those two, and then she had the two from Dooku, and then they go together and become the S-curve staff.
Yeah.
She bought the one from the black market that Maul eventually gets. This is number 5.
The one that Maul gets,
or almost, like, depending on how you look at it.
That was another reference, though, by the way. Ventress references her Jedi hood, having known some of the Jedi ways as she's talking to Omega. And this is a small nod of the head to her tutelage under Kai Narek, very briefly before he died. And I still question as to whether or not she was a Jedi. I wonder if she was ever brought back to the temple, or if Kai Narek was one of those wandering Jedi that kind of was just always out on a mission somewhere. Maybe she never saw the Jedi Temple. It doesn't seem like she ever has. The way that she speaks of the Jedi and throughout the Clone Wars, it doesn't seem like, the temple's not really like an ex-home of hers or whatever. If you like, at least that's the way I've always looked at it. So I don't really know if they'll maybe fill in that story or not, but I would love to see more stories from her youth, like from her downfall as a Jedi to Dooku's apprenticeship. That's a really fascinating story, at least to me. Another Easter egg was we haven't seen her with this particular haircut since those flashbacks in the Clone Wars of her Jedi youth look. Although back then it was purple and now it's blonde, so that's like the main difference. But the whole haircut and everything is basically the same, which is super awesome. And the final little Easter egg here is her quote. I think one of you guys mentioned it earlier. It's "I've got a few lives left." This was a nod of the head to the Dark Disciple novel and to the story that she had supposedly initially died, and now she's back again. So there was that as well. So that's just a little bit of trivia there. Yeah. So we do a bit of a. I'm gonna try and wrap it up here for Bad Batch because we got like 2 more things to talk about. But we do a fun rating system on the podcast called Pablo Points of Poodoos. So it's a scale of 7. 3 Pablo Poodoos is just the worst of the worst, and then moving up from there, you got 2 Pablo Poodoos, 1 Pablo Poodoo, and then a Bendu. A Bendu is like a 50% score, and then you got Pablo points. You got 1 Pablo point, 2 Pablo points, and then 3 Pablo points is the best of the best of the best. So maybe we can start with you, Darren, and then Pax. But what would you award this episode?
That's 2 Pablo points.
2 Pablo points. That's 2 positives.
That's so that's like a great episode. Yeah, 2 Pablo points is great. 3 is like the ultimate, like the best of Star Wars. You'll give it a what?
No.
You give it a great? Two
I'll give
Pablo
it
points?
2.
2 Pablo points. All right. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Alrighty.
Oh yeah. I enjoyed. I want to see more Asajj.
So I'm gonna go with 0.5. It's a bit lower than you guys, but it was north of a Bendu, which is like 50%. But I thought it was good in a way that good storytelling, lots of stuff to talk about, of course, which is, I think, definitely probably giving it some bonus points in my ballpark, but yeah, as far as the character goes, I mean, always such a great character. How she comes back, that's I think what just brought it a little bit underwhelming for me. Just like having a lack of reason for her return, and just how they fix that story, which has been like I said earlier, like living rent free in my head for quite a few years at this point, and been part of the canon for so long, and why they decided to change that, I have no clue. But yeah, I guess we'll find out, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do to explain her reappearance and those future stories. So,
dude, I could argue for an hour about what you just said.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's pointless at all that they brought her back. I think she's exactly who they needed to bring back for this episode.
We got to end this adventures in babysitting.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Well, there we have it.
We need something more exciting. We need and I thought it was amazing to see a Jedi in a show that was full of not Jedis. Then you get to understand that you got a really powerful character in your group right now, and then she stands out, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one moment in this episode that I think is the best moment in all of Star Wars, and that alone I feel is worth 2 Pablo points. It's the first time so when they go to get off the capsized boat, Crosshair puts out his hand and Ventress takes it. She looks kind of sullen when she takes it. This is the first time that either of those 2 characters have ever made a social gesture.
That's definitely a deep thing to observe. Yeah.
There are some pretty strong moments they're trying to make there, that these 2 characters are softening up a little bit.
It's seriously, think about any time anybody's ever interacted with Ventress up to that point. She has killed them for even implying that she was weak.
Right.
He's not saying that she's weak in that moment. She doesn't take it that way, but she doesn't need to take his hand. She's capable of hopping into the ship, the Marauder, without any help at all. She could just force her way in or whatever. And he knows that. Like, she just kicked his ass an hour before, like he was nothing, and 2 of his buddies. So, like, it's this welcoming, he's now learning social skills and interacting with this person that could just decimate him at any moment, no matter what advantage he has.
Honestly, I thought when she pulled out her saber that a couple of the Bad Batch were going down right there.
Yeah, maybe they should have. It would have wrapped up. It was beginning to wrap up the show a bit quicker than we thought. That would have been a surprise, though.
Not yet. Not ready for it quite yet.
Still recovering from tech.
Her pulling out the
Yes,
saber
I'm a little bit.
really said a lot about that situation, because in the first fight, sorry, dude, I could actually do another hour on this episode. She takes away their guns the first time they confront her, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I'm going to show you that on a physical level, I can take the three of you without the Force. And she almost does it, but Wrecker is just so ridiculously strong and good at hand-to-hand combat that, you know, like, I love Wrecker. He's one of my favorite characters because people really underestimate him all the time. And it's like, no, he could probably take out the rest of the Bad Batch at any point. Like, he's not as dumb as people think he is. He's an explosive expert. He is good with people. Like, he's always trying to get Crosshair in the group. He's ribbing him and like trying to bring him in. So while he's kind of a child in a lot of ways, he's not that dumb. But so she decimates the three of them basically without the Force in hand to hand. They get their guns back. They show their like tactical skills and everything. And she's like, fine, you guys really want to go to weapons combat? I'll also take you to that.
Yep.
So that moment when she's reaching out and she brings up the mana rays, I think that the dark side that she isn't really admitting that she still has summoned that.
Yes.
I don't think that was a response to the mana ray thing.
I agree. I looked at that. I looked at it that way too. I thought that that was a product of her imbalance in a way. But how they wrapped that up, how she got out of that situation, I really appreciated that part, because all I could think about was everything that Quinlan Vos has taught her, and you know, like being a Jedi and stuff like that. And that was something that I very much appreciated.
And this is the first time I've appreciated seeing a yellow lightsaber, because the Jedi think that they're a balanced force, but they're not. They're a force for good. She hasn't settled there, but she is finding balance. Like the orange lightsabers for Hati and can't think of his name.
Oh, Balin.
Balin's cool.
Thank you, Balin. Yeah. They were almost dark side, but they're kind of balanced.
They're reminiscent of yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so like I hope that they go forward from here using yellow lightsabers as you're kind of balanced, but you're a little more towards the light side.
They had yellow lightsabers for the Jedi Temple Guards back in Clone Wars as well. So it's been nice to see like them used more, I guess, more frequently now. You know, and of course, like Rey gets a yellow lightsaber by the end of Episode 9, and I mean the High Republic. A lot of these High Republic stories coming out have thrown yellow lightsabers in the mix as well for some of those Jedi. I think there was one or two at least that showed up in the Acolyte trailer.
Oh, there's 3 in one shot.
Oh, a bunch in there.
Yeah. There's one shot where you can see 3. I think the first time we saw yellow lightsabers was Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah.
Probably. I'm surprised more people aren't complaining about that.
They're too focused on other complaints.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think I got another subject that we have to bash through this evening, or at least 2 more. So we'll transition here and move on to subject number 2. But it's been great to talk about so much Bad Batch this week. So let's hit the land speeder and get into the next thing. All right, so I found an article on GameRant.com. This was an article published 3 days ago, and it was titled "Star Wars: 7 Changes in the Special Editions That Improve the Original Trilogy." Now, I'm very interested to hear both of you guys' opinions on this, because you know, seeing as you are of a slightly different generation of Star Wars fan, you know, this thing has been a controversial thing for years. Like, you know, like there's an entire legion of fans out there that are, you know, fighting tooth and nail to continuously enhance the original like Laserdisc release of A New Hope, which is like sort of hilariously dedicated to this project. You know, like just for years this has been an ongoing thing. But I'm very curious to know, you know, just off the bat, did you guys like when the special editions came out in the 90s?
It didn't really matter to me too much. Like the originals still hold up today, like just the originals. And when you see the extra stuff, it didn't really change anything or add anything. They were all really good. Nobody was driven to Star Wars because of these small little clips that they added.
Right. Yeah. What about?
I was about 11, I think, when those movies came out, maybe 12. And I really loved it at the time, because it's like, hey, you've updated some of the graphics, you've improved some stuff that I barely noticed. There were some stuff in there I bumped up against, but nothing that I was actually mad about, right? I don't get why people are so upset that he added a bit of stuff. Han shot first is the only thing that it's like, okay, that's actually a character moment you screwed with. Like, he's a badass that takes charge, even though he's this giant dork also, because like Han Solo, sorry, I'm gonna go on a rant. you opened it up for me.
This is good.
Han Solo is masquerading this badass smuggler, right? Because when they do the Obi-Wan and Luke scene, he's calm and in control and slick and everything. And the moment they leave, he's like, oh my God, we just got all this money for just a milk run. Like, oh, this is great. We can go do this and pay off the debt. Like, he totally loses his cool. And then Greedo comes over and threatens him, and he's back into the persona that he gives off, right?
Yeah.
And that character throughout the films, by the end of Return of the Jedi, he is both of those characters by the end of those films.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't mind that about
Like
his
the-
character at all.
Yeah.
But changing it so Greedo shoots first changes the nature of that scene.
Yeah.
What
I
it
mean,
says.
that's unnecessary. Oh yeah, we have to bring that up, eh?
Yeah. Ironically,
that's my one.
that's your one gripe. Okay, yeah. Ironically enough, that isn't on this list of because this list is literally targeting changes that this. So the author of this article is specifying 7 changes that improved the original trilogy. So we can definitely talk about the things that you guys don't like as well. But I think it's an interesting perspective because I saw the headline and I thought to myself, nobody looks at any of those changes as favorable coming from a perspective, not me, but somebody else that would not like any changes made to those movies. And I've never.
And the Greedo shot was on that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And the Greedo shots among so many other slight tweaks and alterations and stuff. But this list of 7 different things, the Greedo thing isn't on there because I don't think the author of this article doesn't look at that as a favorable change. The article is only talking about 7 things that improved the movies as favorable things. So number 7, starting off with the top one, is a change to A New Hope, where they changed English to Aurebesh. So for a few years, the Star Wars films had no what we call basic, or the written down version of English in Star Wars has got these letters and characters which are very blocky looking and very sci-fi looking. And it's very simple. It's a letter for letter translation. So if you go to Galaxy's Edge or something like that, you pull out your app, you can, people who haven't memorized the alphabet can translate it and stuff like that. This has been a consistent thing throughout all of the Star Wars films, like all of the TV shows, absolutely everything. Aurebesh is the go-to for written down language. And, this was, I think in my opinion, this is probably one of the biggest beneficial changes to Star Wars because it definitely keeps the lore consistent, when it comes to things like screens and, signs on buildings and stuff like that.
I like the Aurebesh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pro.
Same.
Yeah.
And I've had people argue with me that they didn't change that because I remember as a kid reading R2's what he was saying on the screen in the X-Wing, and everybody's like, no, it was always our Aurebesh. It's like, no, I remember reading it, man.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I'm in there.
Yeah, for sure. Number 6 is extended scenes, revealing how certain things were supposed to play out. So in Empire Strikes Back, in episode 5 and in episode 6, there were changes. One is an extended sequence to the Wampa scene in episode 5 when Luke gets attacked by the Wampa. Some additional extensions were made onto that sequence, which was once quite short. Extended the action, I guess, in the cave. The build up to this creature mawing meat off a bone and looking at Luke with a bloodied up face and everything like that definitely makes the creature
Absolutely
quite vicious. So
I didn't find that really all that necessary.
Absolutely hated it.
Really?
Because you took one of the most artistic things in Star Wars and butchered the shit out of it. Like those scenes don't match up at all. Like the lighting's different, even the color of the snow is different. And you went from there's one 3 second or 3 there's three. Sorry, my brain just farted. You almost don't see the Wampa in the original, right? You see its hand, you see its drag him and stuff, but there's the one shot of him attacking on the Tauntaun that you get to see the Wampa. And before DVDs and stuff, you couldn't pause it to actually see what it was. So that was the horror movie sequence of Star Wars that really nailed artistic license, because they're like, this thing looks terrible, we shouldn't show it. And then they go back.
Often, yeah, your imagination will make the best monsters.
Exactly. It was all about how do we film this so it's artistic and we get the point across without making it cheesy. And then they go back, and the new Wampa they made looked worse than the original that they made in the 70s.
You're right.
And from an artistic point of view, if it's not adding to the scene, you shouldn't put it in there at all.
No, exactly. And the sound of the 70s one also doesn't match up to the new one where he's chewing on the bone and he's like, oh, I've got some saliva coming out, better move my dinner away. Like, that was so lame.
What are your thoughts on
the inconsistencies?
What are your thoughts on the extended Rancor scene?
I didn't notice they extended it.
Yeah, I couldn't recall it. I'd have to see it right now.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you can look up side by sides on YouTube and stuff. So okay, so you're giving a pass to the one and a hate for the other, hey?
I was cool with the first one.
I would hate's a strong word.
I hate the second. I hate the Wampa thing. That really ruined that scene.
Just unnecessary.
All right, fair enough. I actually never minded it. I mean, I'm not super.
No, it's an abomination. I'm not gonna. This is what I'm totally gonna hoist myself up on my own petard.
I never minded it too much. I mean, I was quite young when those special editions came out, so I think the first time I probably saw those on VHS were probably the re-releases, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's I guess it's just one of those things. Those extended scenes, I can't remember if those were VHS special edition or if they were the DVD special edition or if they were the Blu-ray. I think they may have been, because there was like multiple different re-releases and each of them kind of did some slight tweaks. So I can't remember which edition that particular sequence was extended. But yeah, here's number 5, improving Cloud City. So adding depth to and beauty to the iconic Star Wars location. Some scenes were expanded and also inserted into the surrounding sequence of Cloud City. One very prominent environmental establishing shot is a very pulled out camera view of Bespin floating above the clouds in the sunset, and that was not in the original film. Neither was a sequence of a bunch of people in a hallway where you're looking out the window at the city, and it was also, sunset. It was I think it was in the sequence in which Lando is giving his emergency voice warning about the Empire invading and stuff like that. What did you guys think of those changes?
Honestly, I to be honest.
Okay, I'm going the other way with this.
These little things like these add-ons, they don't add much to the scene. They just seem like you add them on later so you could resell Star Wars again.
I liked it because the original set seemed claustrophobic, and they actually added quite a lot of windows to scenes where there was none in the original movie. Right? My dad still has all the VHS, and I watched them a couple of years ago, and it's like there's no exterior shots for any of Cloud City, and they're all these really tight sets where you don't have much room to move around. But on the other hand, it's a mining facility, so it should be like that. So I love it, but it honestly shouldn't be there.
Well, the original Star Wars is 1978, and what I like about watching the original Star Wars is kind of getting that old nostalgic feel, and when you start putting 2000 and late 90s kind of CG into it, it just kind of takes away.
Well, especially with what they've been doing on Disney Plus recently, they've even gone as far as to change Boba Fett's voice and everything, and it's like that wasn't necessary.
Yeah, that change I think was a special edition. That was the DVDs in 2004 when those were really re-released. They had Tamura Morrison come in, do recordings, because at the time he was working on Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, so he was around to do some ADR for those films. Yeah, but that was a 2004 DVD change, I believe. Here's another one. Number 4 is adding Ian McDiarmid to episode 5. Originally, Ian McDiarmid was not playing the Emperor in episode 5, and it's a huge role for the series. One piece of continuity, of course, is putting him in there instead of the guy who was playing him with the rubber mask. What were your guys' thoughts about that one?
Man, you get me tossing. I do like to see these things, but I don't find them all that necessary. It is cool to see them, though.
I like and hate it because, like you said, continuity, it does improve it. But you know why the original was so perturbing? The eyes were actually not human eyes. They were
messed up.
Eyes are definitely a little weird. Like they look like it's very odd. Yeah, I've never liked the original look. Yeah,
fair enough. But they put in chimpanzee eyes to make people uncomfortable. And at that time, especially not being able to just watch National Geographic all the time and stuff, people didn't know why that scene was so disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that was the first time that the Emperor was really established as a Sith Lord, as well as the idea that he was this
pretty epic villain,
pretty creepy guy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so by the time he shows up in
didn't call him a Sith.
Return of the Jedi, he's such a more prominently established creepy kind of old Sith Lord, right? Like getting off the shuttle at the beginning of the film, wearing the cloak. You don't really see his eyes at first at all, until much later in the film, and it's unsettling, right?
Yeah, when you go back, now we have a better idea of what he's supposed to look like. You go back and watch the old movies, and he's got these Play-Doh eyes, and they're weird.
Yeah, definitely.
So they actually didn't use term Sith until the mid '90s.
Yes, that's true. Actually, yeah, I think I think it was one of the not one of the novelizations for when the word Sith was first introduced.
Probably, but I got it first from Mysteries of the Sith video game.
Okay, yeah. So at that point, it was already a thing. It does say in the 1974 rough draft of Star Wars, in the 1976 novelization of Star Wars, Darth Vader, the Dark Lord of the Sith, was in there. So I think to anyone who read the books, the novelizations of the movies, they would have had that piece of lore. But yeah, verbally, it's not actually in the movies until the time of the Phantom Menace, I guess. But yeah, I think because it was part of the lore already, it had snuck its way into Star Wars novels, through the expanded universe, and therefore a lot of the material that came off those novels being, video games, comic books, etc. So here's number.
Okay, because I thought the first time we got into merchandise was in the mid '90s. There was somebody that reproduced a bunch of glasses and stuff, and the only reason people knew they were fake was because they said Lord of the Sith on the Vader glass, and that was something that had apparently not been on anything until the mid '90s, like '95 or '96, I think it was.
That may have been when it gained a lot more recognition, I would say, because the '90s is definitely when a lot more ramp up happened with released material, but leading into the prequels, that is. But yeah, it was a piece of established lore, I think, from the very start. Here's number 3: making Mos Eisley a spaceport. So breathing more life into Tatooine. There were scenes added into A New Hope around the cantina, and these ones particularly are the targeted scenes that get a lot of flack for adding digital creatures and getting some of those environmental scenes. But what are your guys' opinions on that?
I understand why people were upset by them. They were as good as graphics could really do at the time, but they weren't great. Yeah. So it kind of took people out of the moment. You have these little things that will just take you out of the scene instead of focusing on the characters. All of a sudden, you got a large animal that you're now watching and criticizing, and then get back into the scene.
Yeah, especially with the Jawa yo-yo.
Yeah,
I must say they have not held up.
That they added,
go ahead.
I like that they added, but it was not. There was nothing in there, even at the time when it was new, that I was like, "That looks great. I'm glad you did it."
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. To this day,
maybe okay, but
since the movies have been enhanced up to the resolution of 4K on Blu-ray at this point, those particular scenes I don't think have aged nearly as well. As some CG scenes have aged in other films, but
they weren't even great back then.
No, they weren't even great back then. And I think one of the most jarring ones that was replaced a second time was the Jabba the Hutt sequence that got added into A New Hope.
Have you seen the fan edit?
The fan edit?
Somebody redid that scene but instead of Jabba being in the hangar, it's a walking hologram thing. Like from, you remember at the beginning of Phantom Menace when the voice story is walking through Naboo? They did that in that scene, and it improves it so much.
Interesting. Huh.
You know what? I don't even mind seeing some of these scenes outside of the movie as like special features and little snippets, you know? Like they don't need to be put into the movie. You can add them later.
Yeah.
Here's
like all the scenes that have been coming out for Revenge of the Sith.
Here's
some of those scenes, it's like, I'm upset that not in the movie.
Here's another one. Number 2, adding scenes to the ending. So the end of Return of the Jedi featured a culmination of celebration shots across the galaxy from Coruscant to Bespin to Naboo. Though there was quite a few people celebrating across the galaxy. This has been worked into the canon to a number of novels now being released in the canonicity. The Aftermath trilogy, for example, featured interludes that crossed over with many of these added scenes in those films. Also, the reintroduction of Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker as the Force Ghost, I think is probably the most necessity now than ever, having Ahsoka being a very prominent story. But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think of that? What do you think of Force Ghost Anakin and adding scenes to the ending of Return of the Jedi?
I think it's better than just adding animals. I mean, you're talking about an event that goes across the galaxy, so getting a better understanding of what happened is cool.
I will absolutely forgive the Hayden Christensen overlay for the fact that they got rid of Yub Nub and did Victory Celebration.
Yeah.
That improved, and I love seeing the other planets and everything, especially them toppling the giant statue of the Emperor. Those are phenomenal things to change. I love that, because Yub Nub was an abomination.
Yeah, I never liked Yub Nub either. Yeah. Improved visuals is the number one thing. Go for it, Pax. Yeah.
Oh yeah, when it comes to adding Hayden Christensen at the end of it, I didn't mind that because I feel that the younger Hayden Christensen appealed to the younger generation, whereas the original appealed to me, and Star Wars is for everybody. So I understand why anybody would like both of those characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually hate that they put him in. I just thought it was kind of rude because it's like, well, this actor was in the movie forever, and now he's not.
Yeah.
Well, he is still. He's just wearing the Vader costume.
To all the like these, and to let the originals reach out to the younger generations, the people that grew up on the prequels. That's a better way to reach those people and have them understand what is happening there, because they won't recognize the older guy either.
Right.
No, it's like, who's that guy? Even when I was a kid, I didn't understand who that was.
Yeah. And why are the Emperor's eyes like that? It's ridiculous.
You're just trying to tease me now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like George's reasoning for it was he wanted to redeem that character, visually made a point of putting that character back to the last moment that he was known to be I guess a hero, right? And the redemption of Anakin Skywalker is sort of visually portrayed in that moment, and anyone else who's become a Force ghost and maintained their identity after death has also maintained that look. So in The Last Jedi, when they Force ghosted Yoda, they made an effort to use the puppet because that was the last point that we saw him, right? But he never had a redeeming, he never went to the dark side and came back or whatever. But I think like it was kept very consistently so far, I think, with who's been able to maintain their identity after death. And it's been so cool to see Hayden back in Star Wars and see him show up in Ahsoka and keep that going. And I feel like that little tidbit that they did for that movie in the special editions was probably, I don't think anyone knew that would carry through to this day. When we're doing like live action Star Wars shows and stuff like that, I don't think anyone knew that would actually be a very useful thing to do, is get Hayden in there instead of Sebastian.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, that being said though, the original actor is still in the film. He's still the guy who talks to Luke right before he dies. He's still the guy who says, or who has to look on Luke with his own eyes, kind of thing. So he's still very much part of the movie and still very much there. And so I think like for the scene that it really mattered a lot, they kept him, and for the scene that matters most to current storytelling, they got Hayden in there. So it's sort of the best of both worlds, like you said.
Okay, you softened me up a bit.
Yeah. Here's number one. Improved visuals. This is number one on the list. This is very vague, but there are small enhancements having been made through all of the films, from the Emperor's Force Lightning to cleaning up lightsabers, to improving, some of the visual effects scenes, and replacing them with, precise, rendered, 3D. The X-Wing fight with the Death Star is probably the most dialed up since the original release. That's probably been the most visually enhanced, if you will. What are some, I don't know if you guys have any examples or not, but what are some thoughts on that? Just in general, like small audio tweaks, like visual enhancements, stuff like that.
Okay, let's take, for example, the lightsabers. Like, I appreciate the original kind of filming of the 1978 original lightsabers. You can see them. To change them, to me, would be unnecessary and kind of ruin a little bit. But adding things like celebrations across the galaxy and changing hating, not such a big deal. Yeah. But those little tweaks are not such a big deal at all. Like, I like the old stuff.
There's a couple tweaks they did that were really added. Like I'm thinking of the Hoth scene where you can see through the cockpit, or you can see the shadow of the AT-AT through the cockpit window, and like it goes right through the aluminum bar that holds the front window in. As a kid, that drove me nuts. Whereas now it's like you can still kind of see it, but it's not in your face.
Right.
I don't mind the imperfections. It's these kind of old little imperfections I do appreciate a lot. And when they take too much of it out, it kind of saddens me a little bit. But there's always the originals. I can just go back and watch them. I don't have to be upset about anything.
Yeah.
I wish they would release the original cuts on Blu-ray.
On Blu-ray, so you could see it real nice.
Yeah, just so that I don't have to go pull out a VHS player and try and figure out how to connect it to my brand new TV.
Heck yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. That's more nostalgia for you. Double down on nostalgia.
Right, and then I'm buying.
Be kind, rewind.
Movie.
Here's the thing. I'll leave off with. Movies are definitely a piece of art. In many ways, lots of people contribute to them. The person behind the original 6 films, at least the 3 that we're talking about right now, George Lucas, definitely decided that when he made those movies initially, they weren't made to the standard that he wanted them to be made. And that's part of, like, a big reason that he went back and made so many changes and tweaks to them. So I guess what I'll leave us with is, if you guys have ever made something that you're not happy with, would you, if given the chance to go back and fix it up, take that chance, even if somebody else really loves it the way it is?
Go ahead, Beck.
Wow, that's a deep question.
Okay, I'll give you a minute, then I'll do mine then. I am an artist. I am never happy. Oh, sorry, I just swore. Never happy with anything I do. You, as an artist, you never actually finish anything. You only abandon it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Even
I personally like to just move on to the next. Like, just move on to the next. If it's not perfect, it's okay. Just move on to the next.
I believe if you let George Lucas go back right now and you're like, here's $100 million, redo the original trilogy again, he would.
I'm not entirely convinced if he would redo. I mean, like, that would entail like recasting and redoing so much stuff. Like, but I mean,
with like CGI and that.
I do believe that
George Lucas.
I do believe that with an adequate amount of budget, that he would probably go back and once again do some things that probably weren't in the original budget when enhancing those original films. A lot of those CG scenes that were put in could look so good today. Like, if they were done today, they could look absolutely amazing. And quite frankly, a lot of the scenes that they filmed with that footage, being upscaled to 4K at this point with those negatives, a lot of visual effects could be added to the background, right? So that way you wouldn't have a lot of mismatch between, like what you were saying with the Wampa sequence there, Darian. Definitely
it wasn't supposed to be like that.
Definitely a creative choice, whether or not you want to see the full Wampa or not. But things like the lighting and like the color and things like that can very much be fixed, given the time and money to do so. So like, I think he would for sure go back and continue to edit those films. Those films have not been the only films that he's edited though. He's made changes to the prequels as well. When the Blu-ray releases came out, and then when the Disney Plus release came out, there was 2 waves of changes that were made. The original series of prequel changes that were going to be made, aside from making them pretty much while the movies were still in theaters, there were some changes being made for the 3D releases. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched Phantom Menace when it was released in 3D, but there were many small tweaks to the project when that film was being converted over to 3D. So the original trilogy is not the only set of three movies that have had these changes made, but small changes definitely to the prequels, but they definitely go unnoticed because they're quite a bit smaller. But I don't know. I think I've never really cared too much for just like, I mean, hey, like I respect the man. If he wants to go back and change his stuff, like I'm all for it. Like whatever it is. But I guess everyone's got their perspective on it, so it's been super interesting to hear what you guys think, because you grew up with these movies under a certain different light. So thanks for sharing all that.
Oh yeah, I definitely appreciate George Lucas's like perfectionism and his passion. Like he did make probably the best movies of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that
I really don't think people give his wife enough credit. The Clone Wars, when I went back and watched it, this is my goal of watching the Clone Wars, because I wanted to know more about Darth Maul. Like I didn't grow up with the Clone Wars. I was well beyond that. But I was one day wanted to learn more about Darth Maul, so I had to go back and start watching the Clone Wars. So I didn't watch it in order. I just watched the Darth Maul parts, and holy crap, I was almost slammed to the floor with amazing Star Wars content. Like all the stuff like and understanding Dooku. Holy moly, I never understood Dooku until watching Clone Wars. And Dooku is a key to understanding what's happening in the prequels. Like there's just so much important stuff that happens in it.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the main reasons why I recommend most people to watch Clone Wars. I mean, I think like for some it can be a little daunting to look at how many seasons there are, but it goes very quickly because each episode is only 22 minutes, and it's like such an essential story to watch, and it's the last thing that George Lucas ever did, right? And like I think that's probably the big key takeaway is like he still helmed the show, even though Dave Filoni was like the director. George was still the guy in the story room with all of the writers all the time, constantly brainstorming like what story to do next, and like what character to further give depth to, and etc. So that's
they seem to work well together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I got one more subject that we should just kind of express our way through, and then we'll wrap things up for this podcast episode. But which is the Acolyte trailer, came out last week, and I couldn't help but notice that I'm looking at these likes and dislikes like right now, and I couldn't help but notice that it has been absolutely insane, just like how many dislikes there are compared to how many likes. And I think the last time that I looked, I mean, I took a screenshot and put it in the Discord thread for the Acolyte, but it had 552,000 dislikes compared to 180,000 likes. And for those of you wondering, like, okay, how do you get the like count back? It's just a little Chrome extension, it brings it back again. But it's kind of unreal. And like I totally get the fact that a lot of people might be nervous about this show, like but I just couldn't believe how contrasted, like there were so many people that were already like willing to just bomb that show. But I wanted to ask you guys, like, what do you think about the Acolyte? Seeing as I haven't heard from either of you guys about what your feelings are about that show, how you think that show is going to play out. Is it going to be good, bad? Would you want to see it, etc.? Maybe we can start with you, Pax.
I am also shocked at all the drama that has unfolded from the Acolyte. Though I do understand it, it's all behind Leslie Headland or Leslie.
Yeah, that's okay.
Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Headland. They're saying some of the worst things, and people are watching Star Wars are obviously George Lucas fans. So a lot of this negativity towards the trailer is solely focused on that rhetoric and not the content of the trailer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I see people that are like they don't like the idea of so Kathleen Kennedy's talking about having a diverse cast. So you see the trailer, all there is diverse people, no white people, blah blah blah. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me what color people are in the Star Wars movies. I just want a good story and have it relate to the rest of the stories.
I feel like they've really put themselves in a precarious position where there's 12 Jedi that ignite their lightsabers in one of the shots. You're telling me that they killed 12 Jedi in one go after all these other Jedi have been killed over time, and the Jedi Council isn't like, hey, maybe the Sith are back. Like that, there are ways to write around that where you can fix that, but I find it hard to believe that they're like, yeah, this underworld organization killed 12 Jedi together. That's where I'm concerned. I'm still going to watch the show.
I am concerned if that's actually what's going to happen, if there is a Sith narrative behind this. But if it's just Force users using the dark side, I'm fairly chill with that.
Yeah. I think the series is mainly going to be about the path of the open hand, I think they're called. It's one of the new villain groups that is in the books. I think it's mostly going to be about that. But
and I also think of the Jedi and the Sith as more of a religious sort of points of views that more than absolute truths.
Yeah.
So there could be other sort of religious points of views that don't necessarily have to be Sith.
Oh yeah, in the timeline that we're at, I think that's the end of 3 different religions about the Force. There's the path of the open hand. There's the ones that think that the Force shouldn't be used at all ever. And what's the third one, Josh?
I'm not entirely sure. I think Path of the Open Hand was introduced in Phase 2 of the High Republic, which I haven't actually read any of those yet. And then I'm not entirely sure about the other ones, but
yeah, there are 3 religions that end about this time period, and all 3 of them are pretty corrupt. And like one was a flat out cult until somebody, the witch, usurps the religion and kills the original founder. And then it gets even more corrupt and screwed up from there. So I
don't have a problem with a story like this.
Oh, I think that's great, actually. I want more of that because it's touching on what they were doing with the Witches of Dathomir that they never actually explored.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is they like to talk. They're talking about taking a villain's perspective, and I don't have a problem with that at all. It sounds exciting to me.
That's what I want. That's why
I want that too.
That's exactly.
I think like, you know, with the I guess the goal for a show like this to tell a story that's, you know, 100 years before Phantom Menace, and to really market it as a prequel to a prequel. You know, like the re-release of the Phantom Menace is coming up in theaters, you know, for May 4th weekend, and if anyone's going on May 3rd or 4th, you know, you'll see an Acolyte special look of the Acolyte after that film is over. And so like their market, and there's a new poster out there floating around with that logo on there saying, you know, stick around to the end. So like, you know, to any movie that's like being marketed like that, you know, like advertising like a show that has so much relevance with that movie, you know, tells me that it's very, very likely that any Jedi who die in the show, it's going to be a cover-up story. Like this is probably, it's not the return of the Sith story, because it's been evident they've been around all this time. They've just been lingering in the shadows, gaining strength, right? The return of the Sith story is the prequels. So like this is a different story. This is a story about, you know, like perhaps their rise in power, you know, but behind the golden age of the Jedi, which is the you know, the High Republic era. You know, this event is supposed to probably symbolize the ending of that era and why it's no longer the golden age of the Jedi. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the golden age of the Jedi is, you know, like over because the Sith are back. It could definitely mean something else. But you know, we've seen one big huge villain story in the High Republic with the Nihil, and you know, like there's been some interesting developments there. But yeah, I'm very curious to see like how they'll work that in, how Sith kind of play a role in this story. You know, whether it's them, you know, being all Palpatine-like and, you know, manipulating others to act in their favor, you know, against their enemies, and leaving no witnesses behind, you know, if they do find out who it is or whatever. But there's a number
that's exactly what I want.
And that's exactly, I think, what I hope it's going to be. So like the creator of the show has come out and said, like, everything you see in this trailer, you know, everything you think about what this show is, like, it's not what you think it is, right? So like there's probably a lot of leading shots in the trailer, a lot of things that, you know, this is supposed to be a show that's supposed to be very surprising to us. It's a mystery, it's a thriller. It's also you know, a bit of a murder mystery to the Jedi too. Yeah. So yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if you find out that Lee Jung Jae is the guy who plays Soul, that he is the villain after all. You know, it could be anything. It's a murder mystery.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm still very curious as to why this show is getting so much flack, because I think it's got a lot of potential. On the other hand, I think there's probably a I guess I don't know how to describe it. There's a lot of risk, right? Like there's a lot of risk in telling a story like this, because the Phantom Menace is, at least in my opinion, like such a great way to enter like the Star Wars galaxy. Like there's a lot of political establishment there that kind of gives you an idea for why there's going to be a war, and like why there's all this happening, why there's all that happening. It's like it's very it's an informative movie, right? And I guess like this show, if anything, I just hope it's informative rather than being very vague about things and leaving us with more questions than answers.
The most informative thing to me was Clone Wars.
Yeah, that's a
prequels.
Very
they're
much
trying to jam a lot of information in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. In my headspace, the prequels and the Clone Wars kind of coexist. I guess because like the ending of Episode 2 is also the Clone Wars just as much as the beginning of Episode 3, right? So like it's sort of I guess in my headspace just all kind of one event, but yeah, very informative show.
You know what I wanted from the Clone Wars? The actual Clone Wars. We didn't really get it in the Clone Wars.
The actual what do you mean by the actual Clone Wars?
They didn't really show many battles and stuff. Like it was mostly about what was going on in the citizens' lives and what was going on in politics. And you get these little snippets of like there was the second Geonosis campaign. They go in depth in that. That was my one gripe about the Clone Wars. It really wasn't actually about the war.
Right. Yeah. You know what?
To me, it actually was. I had to understand the Separatists and Dooku.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was great. That they needed to show those perspectives. And like Dooku, like you said, in Attack of the Clones, I didn't get that character. And I grew up loving Christopher Lee, especially when he started doing the metal albums. But you needed the Clone Wars to find out who that character actually was.
Yeah, and for that moment to actually mean something to the audience. Yeah. And when I went back to go watch the prequels after the Clone Wars, that moment was a billion times better.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And seeing Cody, understanding Cody, he's only there for one moment, and you're just like, holy crap, he just turned on Obi-Wan. Wow.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about the clone chips. Sorry, we're gonna keep this going for another at least hour, Josh. We're gonna do the Terry Chu episode that was super long, right? We're gonna decimate that.
Amazing. I gotta sign off in like 15 minutes or so, but yeah, feel free to keep this going. Yeah.
I'm really not trying to draw it out, but there's so many things we've touched on that it's like, oh, I could do a podcast about this.
Oh man, that's how this podcast just keeps going. That's why we do this every week, because there's always the next
and that
week.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what makes Star Wars great, because you have like so many different connections between so many different series and movies.
Right.
And that's what I love. I'm finding the thing that keeps me here and enjoying Star Wars.
Yeah, and there's so many levels to it, and part of what drives me nuts about people that hate the prequels is it's like, if you only look at it on a surface level, then it's not that great. But like people getting up about, for example, like, why does the Naboo starfighter look better than the X-Wing? And it's like, well, because it was built at a time of decadence by a completely decadent culture. So everything is supposed to be like streamlined and beautiful, and it was handmade in a time where everything should be printed out on the 3D printer, right?
That one there should be pretty explainable.
Yeah, right? Like if you think about it at all, it makes sense. Whereas the X-Wings were pumped out in a factory line by people that didn't care what it looked like, just to get it out as cheap and quick as possible.
Yeah.
Doing anything curved takes a lot longer than doing anything straight lined.
Yeah. And I still think that, Corey's designs still look amazing today. So
do I.
They haven't changed. They just copy his style and make more of it. It's amazing how well it stood up over time.
Yeah.
Sorry, Josh. I'm just opening more cans of worm. You do have to meet me at some point.
No, it's all good. Yeah, no. Okay, I mean, Clone Wars is such a near and dear show to my heart. It's the show that I literally, grew up with. Like the theatrical release came out when I was 13 years old, so I was like the perfect age I was their target audience, for Clone Wars. And here I am,
so painfully young,
almost 30 years old now at this point, and it will. I guess when I think of Star Wars in my head, it like Clone Wars lives rent free. I've seen that show so many times. But at the same time, it's also one of the most like prominent things like in my head vision wise. Like just like when I think of Star Wars, I think of Clone Wars, but I also think of the main 6 movies that I loved long before Clone Wars, but it's kind of right there next to them. And I think that's like, at least to me, that kind of blows my mind that like an animated show lives right next to 6 of the greatest films of all time. It's almost like, to any fans of Lord of the Rings, like there's going to be an animated film coming out later this year called War of Rohirrim. And
I would suggest people watch the Clone Wars first before the prequels.
That would be interesting. I mean, I'm sure a large amount of people got introduced to Star Wars through Clone Wars. Yeah, for sure. I mean,
the younger generations for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
Or even yourself, really.
Yeah, I mean, I was a Star Wars fan.
I didn't watch it until last year,
long before Clone Wars came out. But yeah, I mean, like that's definitely a common trend. Is I find a lot of older Star Wars fans who never got around to watching it when it first came out. Just getting around to watching it now, and it's. But I think it's also important to watch it because it's very relevant for a lot of the current stories that are coming out. To have seen those stories play out on screen, so. But yeah,
and I enjoyed going back and watching them. They're very informative.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's some great stories in there for sure. I think that's definitely, going back to what Darian was saying about, relevance of Clone Wars and Clone Wars. I mean, big battle scale wise, large scale battles. It would be interesting to make like just a list of like the arcs that those like big notable battles are featured. Because the show does take so much time to individualize, different characters and, try and get to the root of this character or that character, whatever. It's not just villain of the week, Star Wars Rebels, I think, was notorious for, I think in a bad way, like not taking the time for us to understand the villains very well. Like a lot of the Inquisitors are very throwaway characters and they're very cool as a concept, but they don't really work in reality. And whereas Clone Wars, like, we got to understand Dooku and Ventress and even characters like Maul and Savage Opress and heck, General Grievous, like he got a ton of screen time as well. So like there was a lot of further depth being put out for characters like that. And Rebels, it was always like, okay, other than the Grand Inquisitor, these other guys, like they just show up and they're kind of like they're made out to be like the villainous fools that can never catch the scrappy Rebels crew of the Ghost, right? And that was something that I kind of missed from Clone Wars, was having these story arcs that kind of gave us some variation, whereas Rebels just went week to week with the same crew of characters all the time. And that's something I do miss with the Bad Batch too, like has been continuing this ongoing story with these characters. Other than Crosshair though, I mean, like and maybe Tech, I haven't found that Hunter's really changed a whole lot. I haven't found that Wrecker's really done a whole lot for me in terms of the story. Omega's definitely been probably one of the more prominent stars of the show, but really like it's not done a whole lot for me in terms of like deepening any characters. And I mean that I think is one of the more lackluster parts of Bad Batch for me, which I wish that they had improved. And perhaps
Hunter's archetype, Hunter's archetype is he's all about observing the world around him, right? Wrecker's archetype is he's a child trapped in a giant muscular body. And then Crosshair is I don't need anyone else. I'm self-sufficient and everything, but I choose to be around these people. So they're characters that are, and then Tech was basically like autistic to a level that he's aware that he's different and he can empathize, but that's not his natural go-to. Whereas Omega's character is all about empathy. Everything about her is interacting and meeting the people around her.
At first I thought she was too empathetic, but then I realized that was supposed to be her character.
Yes, and I think that's what Ventress bumps up against in this episode. That was one of my notes, is that she's too empathetic to ever become a proper Jedi the way she is currently.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, then I thought that was a key part about her character that they needed to emphasize, and I get it. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, with that, we've basically come full circle with our conversation today. So I'll begin to wrap our episode up here. But is there anything, any short last things you guys want to bring up here?
Oh, like 3 pages of notes, point forms. I did that too. So no, don't open that.
How would I leave you something, because you're just talking about Wrecker. Anybody have any idea of why his eyes like that? What happened to his face?
No clue.
No. Well, what if Wrecker at one point was super smart and he had taken damage to the face, and now it's just brain damage is why he behaves like this?
There is a universal. There is actually an in-canon explanation, but I don't remember what it is.
Oh, really? I went looking for it. I could not figure it out. So I just speculate. Like, maybe he was super smart.
They did that with Gregor, the Republic Commando. He was, a bit more normal, and then he had his big explosion in Clone Wars, and then when he shows up in Rebels, he's all a little loopy.
Talking funny?
Yeah.
He talks funny?
He just acts funny.
I still argue that Wrecker is really smart. He's just emotionally immature.
Right. It's like the big kid.
Because like,
not brain damage, hey?
He constantly brings Crosshair back to the group and forces him to interact socially.
Mm-hmm.
He's good with explosives. What explosive tech have you ever seen in anything that was an idiot?
Right, very true.
He's good with tactics with himself.
Well, they probably don't exist anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Anyways, it was a good point to wrap it up here. I think I'm going to go myself.
Thanks so much, guys, for coming on the podcast. And, as always, always welcome back. We're doing another Bad Batch next week, I think on Monday night, because we're away for a few days. But yeah, feel free to pop on. And thank you, Darian. Thank you, Pax. And we'll catch you in another one.
No problem. Yeah, thank you. It was fun.
All right. Thank you so much to our audience for tuning in. Don't forget our email, socials, all in the description below. You can find us with the handle at SW Escape Podcast and our email swescapepodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget, April 14th, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you can watch Republic Commando binged on Yoshiman222's Twitch in the description below, as well as Battlefront Classic Collection has been released. Definitely go check that out. Join the Discord, subscribe on YouTube, give us a like, and may the Force be with you.